Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. According to statistics, there are over 380 million people, 40 airports, and 15 countries in West Africa. Yet less than 10% of the total travel in Africa happens within the region. Joining us now to speak on why we should look inwards for our holiday travels is travel promoter and tourism development expert, Ikechi Uko. Ikechi, welcome to the morning show.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Well, I understand this whole point about travel, tourism, hospitality. And you want Nigerians, you want Africans to travel within Africa, within West Africa, even within Nigeria, where you say the most beautiful beach you have seen in the world is somewhere in Nigeria, in Akwa Ibom, you said?
Yeah.
Yes, but what are the challenges? What's your assessment of the travel infrastructure, both in Nigeria and across West Africa? Because there seems to be real, challenges in terms of the airlines, in terms of transportation, either rail or road.
And sometimes I wonder, we don't really understand the dynamics of travel and tourism. WTTC, which is the private sector body globally, published figures 3 days last week. And they said Nigeria is the second biggest tourism market in Africa, outside South Africa, bigger than Kenya. Nigerians who don't believe there's any tourism happening here. Nigeria has the second largest flight city pairs in Africa. Outside South Africa, Joburg, Durban, we have Abuja, Lagos. Nigeria, so the statistics speak differently from our understanding of tourism.
The statistics appear different from the evidence of our eyes.
No, I think the number of hotel rooms and the occupancy rate of hotels in Nigeria, the number of seats, 14 million passengers in a year, that is bigger than any other environment. So the statistic may be because of our large population, but because we see leisure tourism as tourism, so we ignore the other parts of tourism. We ignore the fact that the religious tourism is thriving very well. We ignore the fact that business tourism is doing well. And in West Africa, in spite, I would say, based on what you've just said, close to 400 million people, 15 countries, 40-something airports now, no dominant airline. We are all reliant on East African airlines to move around in Africa. And we have the richest history out of Africa. We have something that is sad that we can turn to business now, the slave trade history. Almost every slave that we know was taken from the western part of Africa. And this is the 400th year of slavery. Only one country is trying to take advantage of that, Ghana. They are doing year of return, and it's already working. So I don't want to see infrastructure, which we don't have, as an impediment to growing tourism. We can still grow our tourism in spite of these challenges of infrastructure. But I think where the problem is in policy formulation and the regulators who are supposed to drive it. Whatever we need to make tourism work is here. We have the population for domestic tourism. We have more airports than most parts of Africa.
These airports that go up in flames periodically.
I'll give you a good example. Kenya has what I would call as a Nigerian toy airports and toy aircraft. 10, 5, 15 passengers. They fly to places they call airports. And I get to Vipingo, I'm wondering, is it an airport? But that's what drives their tourism. You get to Kunda, it's just a container that is the terminal. And small planes land from Wilson every time. Flown around Kenya with small aircraft that people won't fly in Nigeria, but that's what drives their tourism. So you don't need very large terminals. Before Nigerian Airlines collapsed, no Nigerian will fly on an Embraer 45 that our African World Airline uses. If it's not a 737, we won't do domestic flight. And 737 is not a fit aircraft for our flights. But in the absence of Nigerian airlines, African World Airlines brought this small plane. Every Nigerian that flies to Ghana uses it. Today is the biggest airline. They fly 49 times to Nigeria. No other, that's the highest frequency of flights in and out of Nigeria. And it's an Embraer 45.
Perhaps they don't have incessant delays, unnecessary flight delays, humid airport waiting areas, and all of those things. But you don't want to talk about infrastructure because you don't think that it's enough reason for the tourism sector not to thrive. But let's look at security, because security is top on every tourist's mind. Do you think that there are enough reassurances for people to visit, for even Africans, to come to West Africa, Nigeria in particular?
Okay. If we concentrate on the obligatory travel, not on the leisure travel, religious tourism, people will go anywhere to get whatever makes them happy. And that is obligatory. And that is what thrives in Nigeria. If we take business tourism, which is about meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition, that is obligatory. People will go to places they don't normally want to go to because they have a meeting there. So security challenges, infrastructural deficiencies, and these problems that exist haven't really, from my own experience, stopped any determined country from growing their tourism. Rwanda had nothing. They only concentrated on one animal, and that's a gorilla. And they make $400 million a year from one animal. And how many animals do we have here? Though they have very good security. So for us here, we can't secure the whole country. We haven't, I listened to what the analysis you guys are doing, but there are places that are secure enough to take people. So can we concentrate on those places to make, to grow our tourism? And in West Africa, not every country is insecure. There are places that are secure. And what some of us are trying to concentrate on is, instead of having everybody travel abroad travel outside Africa for tourism, can we travel within here? 80% of all flights in Africa are done by non-African carriers. And that's why no African carrier outside Ethiopian airline makes profit. Why? Because all the other passengers are flying out of Africa. But if there is a growing domestic market, our local airlines will do well. That's why African World Airline is doing well. Why Air Peace seems to be doing well, because they changed their aircraft model. Also, they are looking for smaller aircraft to fly to smaller places. And you don't need to have 100 passengers for your plane to be profitable. You need just 40, 30. And this is the kind of environment we can grow here, and it will be profitable for everybody. So as a tourism promoter, I know security is extremely important. Uganda gets close to 1.5 million visitors every year. An American tourist was kidnapped, and Donald Trump just announced that they have to catch the people. They've released the woman, they paid some ransom. So issues about security are global. We've not had any attack on tourists in West Africa outside what happened in Cote d'Ivoire the other time. So we don't have in tourism, we don't have real global challenges. So our own problem could be human challenges, where we don't have administrators, we don't have laws. We had a master plan since 2006 that have never been implemented, though from the beginning it was never going to work. It was built on a wrong premises that we are going to get tourists from Europe into Nigeria. That won't work. If we have a proper tourism plan, Lagos is the entertainment capital in Africa. Everybody wants to come party in Lagos. Everybody gets enamored by Nollywood, our musicians. So why don't we turn that into an asset?
Earlier on, you referred to Nigeria Airways, and then you cited the example of the African World Airline, which actually is a private initiative.
Yep.
Are you suggesting that if Nigeria should have a national carrier, that it will help? Most of us, you know that the idea of a national carrier in Nigeria is so controversial. And then you've talked about a tourism plan. What, in specific terms, do you expect government to do?
Okay, I'll start from the airline. I was one of the promoters of the national carrier. Because tourism actually runs and flies on the wings of a national carrier. South Africa tourism depends on South African Airways. Dubai tourism depends on Emirates, Kenya Airways and co. Without the connection, you can't really drive tourism. But the way and manner that we launch our attempt to drive a national airline discouraged most of us. I really would want a national airline, or we flag our carriers, and government gives them a kind of support that gives them grandfather rights. So anywhere they go, people won't see it as airpeace. People will see it as a Nigerian airline. What happened to Melview in London will not have happened to a national carrier, where they wouldn't let you pick passengers at a particular airport, where somebody who leases an aircraft and you have not defaulted picks your plane off you and abandons your passengers. Nigerian passengers didn't know that. It wasn't made views for, but we killed the airline. So I will want an opportunity where government is involved in an airline that protects that airline. I will want that. That's good for Nigeria. So I will go to the next point. But the way we had tried the national carrier, that was why it didn't really work. But Nigeria needs, if we cannot drive one, can we flag the ones that are already succeeding and give them the protection they need to represent us? And that way, they can go anywhere with the Nigerian brag, with the Nigerian flag, and nobody will intimidate them or shut down an airport at you. They need the protection of the country. That's why we'll go for a national carrier first. And your second question was on?
About the tourism plan. That you
about
said
the tourism
Nigeria
plan from the beginning. President Obasanjo had a vision. He's actually the most successful tourism promoter we have had. He set up the Presidential Council of Tourism. He actually funded the National Tourism Master Plan. The day it was presented in 2006, I pointed out that the premise on which it was built was wrong, because I knew we are never going to change our visa regime. We are never going to brand ourselves properly. So the Tourism Master Plan should change. And now think inwards. Can we drive our tourism from Africa? Yes, we can. We have two things Africans want. We have the most famous religious leaders in Africa. We can bring in 1 million people using religion every year. We have the biggest entertainers in Africa. We have the soft power that you need to drive tourism. It's already naturally based here. So all we need to do is for government to organize itself properly. But unfortunately, we put people who don't know the tourism environment there. So, and you give them 4 years. In 3 years, they learn. In the 4th year, you move them. Why? They failed in 3 years. The stakeholders abandon them. Government think they're ineffective, they take them out. So government actually shoots itself in the leg by having to repeat this process all the time. You don't need too much regulation for tourism to work. You just need a little bit of direction. Calabar Carnival, a success story, does not rely on a lot of regulation, but it is already thriving. So can we grow more events like that? Can we get Osho-Oshogo to become, there are, the Oni of Ife said there are 500 Yoruba people in the world. Only
500
million, yeah.
Okay,
500 million, sorry. Few live in Nigeria, the others are everywhere. So what is the benefit of that? Can we bring them to visit home every year? That's a lot of money there. Can we do a lot of things that will make people who wouldn't want to come to Nigeria come to Nigeria? I belong to the school of thought that is pushing MICE, this business tourism, because it's obligatory. The event I do brings people from 20 different countries who normally will first time in Nigeria, but because they need that conference, they will come.
That's the Akwaba travel market.
Travel market that we do.
And the Accra
Wezo, yeah, the one we do now with the government of Ghana. We've just signed an MOU. It's now the official travel expo in Ghana. We also do one with the government of Gambia. It's called Bantaba. So we found out that people will travel when it's obligatory. But if for leisure, I don't think Nigeria, which is what Nigerians see as tourism, we want to concentrate on leisure. I don't think the materials medical are right for leisure tourism now. The beach that I said is the best I've seen in the world. I just read a report yesterday, which I'm trying to confirm, that the beach swallows people. Yeah, some people died there during the last 2 weeks, and they said the water carries them away. There's a study to show there's some problem there. I think they should fix it, because that's an asset nobody has bothered to.
I hope nobody has offered a spiritual interpretation about some spirits.
Oh, yes, we are. I'll give you this. I've gone around Africa, and I can tell you it's only in 1 or 2 countries that I have seen rooms that are by water. Africans have a problem with rooms by water. They will always cite the rooms away from the water. I've only seen, and there are Italian-owned properties in Kenya, where they put it next to water. Every other place I've gone to in Africa, the rooms are far from the water. So we have...
So that the mommy water doesn't come out.
Yeah, I slept in a room by water in Egypt. I couldn't sleep.
So we have trust issues when it comes to water.
Yeah.
But you're planning to hold the first Global Tourism Diaspora Conference,
yeah.
Right? What do you hope to achieve with that, and how significant is that for you?
Okay, this is the 400 years of slavery. The first slaves officially recorded were in 1619. And it is necessary for... There had been and I won't say, there's a problem between Africans and their brothers in diaspora. There's a group that calls themselves ADOS, American descendants of slavery. They think they don't need Africa. Africa was cruel to them. They have issues, so they're actually saying they are Israelites. There is a lot of unease between Africa and its diaspora, and there have never been an opportunity for them to heal. So when we bring them here, we go and show them slave ports, and we actually are smiling while you are telling them, oh, your parents were taken from here. Some of them go crying, and they are hurt. So what we are trying to do with the Diaspora Conference is that the easiest way to put 2 families together is for them to visit and encounter each other. So we are bringing the diaspora Africans to meet their brothers, and we talk about tourism. We can visit them in the Caribbean, they can visit us here. We are a large number of travelers who go around the world, and we spend our money in America. I don't think you stayed in a black-owned hotel in America. Yeah, but there are thousands of African-owned hotels in America. So we are trying to put together the first global African Tourism Diaspora Conference. Can we discuss issues? Can we visit them? And we are happy to say that the Caribbean Tourism Organization have signed an agreement with us. They are bringing all the Caribbean countries. Some ministers will be here in Lagos, September 23rd.
Dubai has become a destination of choice for Nigerians. And let me say Africans, you know, those looking for what you call leisure tourism, those going on the obligatory tourism to use your phrase. What kind of lessons do you think that, you know, our country and other countries in the sub-region can learn from the example of Dubai? Well, what is different? The difference?
Okay, the roadshow in Port Harcourt last month, I was a guest speaker on there. They invited me to speak. And what I told the Nigerians there is that Dubai today is the 4th most visited destination in the world. They've overtaken London and Atlanta as the biggest international airport in the world. This is a vision somebody put together and slowly went after it. So they put some things in place. Can we learn from them? Can we learn how they do things? Can we set targets and say that we should be the best in these things we do? I met the richest man in Dubai. He invited me to visit his property, and we went around. And he said something. He said, look, I was in Singapore, and I said when I was coming home that anything I do in Dubai must be the best in the world. So I go to America and see whatever they have done. I copy it, and I come to Dubai, and I make sure mine is better. So that is his own premise of running everything he does in Dubai.
But he's also making a point about leadership.
Leadership is the core to practically everything we wish to do. He told us that if he didn't have the support of the a sheikh, he wouldn't have achieved any of those things. You remember when they were doing Burj Khalifa, they ran out of money, and Abu Dhabi had to come to bail them out. So for us to achieve some of those things, and that's why I'm happy Dubai is coming big time to my event. It gives people the opportunity to learn, to engage. I do a lot of things with them, but I'm not enamored because I think we should be doing better than them in so many things. That's a desert. They don't have our streams, 22 waterfalls. Dubai doesn't have one. I have one of the best waterfalls in the world. We have one of the tallest mountain ranges in West Africa. We have the second largest freshwater delta in the world after Mekong Delta. We have the largest man-made excavation ever done with hand, Benin Moat, the biggest freestanding structure in Africa, bigger than these pyramids, Kano walls. There are things that we have here that are amazing, but we don't know how to tell the story. I went to a place in Delta State where 17 Ishikiri kings have been buried in the last 500 years. It's like the Valley of Kings in Egypt. But you know, when you get to Egypt, there are stories about this, about that, and then when there are massive trees with their names there, Don Domingo, they had these ancient Portuguese names, nobody knows. So we are not able to tell the story. We are not able to organize ourselves. I go to the other places, I see things of lower quality being celebrated. And when I told the Club Med president, there was a place in Nigeria that you open your door and the cloud will float in and you will shut the door behind you and touch the cloud. He told me, that's like a joke. I said, no, it's real. Obudu. So there are places, I went on a road from Maiduguri to Kano, through Yobe, Dama, through the Boko Haram area. Now, it's unbelievable. You think you're in Mars.
We used to go there now. That's the point she was making about security.
We are daring ourselves that the Nigerian army says that people should come on tourism to Sambisa. And we now dared ourselves to find out who will go first. When they come back, 30 days after, I'll visit. but I won't go first.
Okay. So we're counting down now, I mean, days to Easter, and you are promoting tourism within West Africa particularly.
Yeah.
What would you say are the top destinations to visit now, without breaking a bank? And of course, the visa restrictions, I mean, those are also impediments.
West Africa, you don't need visa.
West Africa.
You don't need visa. You can travel with your travel card.
34 visas to visit some of the 50 countries.
54 countries. Yeah, so let me tell you what I do.
Yes.
I travel with my ECOWAS travel certificate. Only Togo doesn't accept it in West Africa if you're coming by air. So I can go anywhere in West Africa without my real passport.
Okay.
I can actually go to Cameroon.
So that you save your leaflets.
Yeah, because I keep renewing my passport every year. I've done the 64-page, and so I try to save it. And for outside West Africa, I recommend Nigerians go to countries where you get visa on arrival.
Okay.
Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Botswana, Seychelles, Mauritius. They have some of the best places. So any experience you want, you can get it from any of these countries where you don't need visa. Outside the problem in the last 2 months with visa from South Africa, South Africa hasn't been that difficult for most Nigerians. So you can go anywhere without that visa problem. And there are amazing places at cheap prices, not too expensive. You could have fun. There are young Nigerian tour operators. These little girls and boys are doing amazing things with the Ikogosi, with Ikogosi, Idonre Hill. They are doing a lot of, I follow their Instagram and Facebook, and these guys are amazing. So for 15,000 naira, 30,000 naira, 60,000 naira, you can go to a lot of places in Nigeria, beautiful places, and they have a network, so security won't be a problem. And they have done it over and over again. There are superstars among them today. There is a TVP, there is a social prefect, there is a Tambolo, there are fine names, and these are young people in their 20s, and they are driving the future of the market, and it's domestic. There are some of them that had upgraded to do international, the NJ tours and the rest of them, but the other ones are all doing within the neighborhood. Then they go to Ouida, they go to, that's Benin Republic, they go, and these are road trips, amazing experiences. They do a lot of in Lagos. So if you're not trying to fly, 300,000 Nigerians go to Dubai. I think that there are like 32 flights that terminate in Dubai every day out of Nigeria. So probably that, and the visa is easy.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, it's good you've given examples of, good destinations across Africa. But, it's more difficult to travel to Europe. It's easier to travel to Europe and move around in Europe or in Asia than to do the same in Africa. So I ask you, what's your take on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which Nigeria is still not so sure whether we will sign or we will not sign, considering that part of the component of that African Continental Free Trade Agreement is the Open Skies Agreement, which will be relevant to your own industry. What's your take?
The aviation industry is went fast and started the Yamoussoukro Accord, later Yamoussoukro Decision, and in 2004, all these things were agreed. Since 2004 to 2019, nothing can be implemented because every airline protects its own neighborhood. So Nigerian airlines will not allow certain open skies to thrive because they think Nigeria has the market and everybody wants to come and play. So there are ways to go around it. I'm a firm believer in the AFCTA, and I have examples of good stories, success stories like Rwanda. Rwanda removed visa restriction, 50% growth on trade with Africa, 22% growth on trade with, in tourism until the recent problem with Uganda, which is unfortunate. But each time a country opens its borders, it does very well. Seychelles has less than a bus stop in Lagos as national population, but it gets all the tourism, top quality tourism, because they have a no visa regime. So the continental thing for Africa is massive, it should be supported, but it could be done from a regional basis. Nigeria and West Africa started the free movement protocol in 1973.
Well, it's an ECOWAS protocol.
Yeah, and since then, West Africa had made no progress. The East Africans started 2-3 years ago, and now they are trying to do free roaming. They are trying to do same taxes across. You have one visa, you can go to Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. I don't need to get multiple visas. So they move fast in the last. They started what they call the North Corridor Project, and they move very fast. So my own thinking is to do regional blocks. First, make it work in your region. Then join the 6 regions, 5 regions contiguous, then the 6th region is the diaspora in Africa. What we are trying to do is the whole African thing together. We are going to have some problems because Nigeria doesn't mind 3 million ECOWAS people being in West Africa, being in Nigeria. We won't notice the difference. But once an East African comes here and settles, we know he's not one of us. Xenophobia comes in. That's what happens in most of the countries. They are used to other people coming who are nearby. But once people from another region come, they see him as a foreigner. Each of these people, Kenya, Uganda, has millions of non-Kenyans resident there. They don't mind. But if you have 100,000 Nigerians get into Kenya today, it's on the cover of the newspaper. So let's do the regions well, then we can integrate. For me, who travels a lot, is a big problem moving around Africa. But I've chosen that, and we've had successes because I had partners who started pushing it in each country. And I have less problem because most of those countries will now give me long-term visas. You're a frequent visitor.
Anyway, we'll wrap up shortly now, but just one question about culture, about skill set within the framework of travel, tourism, hospitality. How important is skill set and then culture? And in this regard, I will even add, the professionalism of the players, of the people, the service providers. You go to some airports in Nigeria or even in parts of West Africa, they treat you like they are doing you a favor. You go to some hotels, it's like they are doing you a favor. You go abroad, you see that within the tourism industry, they are experts. They have the history in their heads, they have the, where's the disconnect there?
Okay, if we had done a proper plan and you start to implement it, one of the first things you set is standards. South Africa had this star grading, tourism grading council, which is independent, which they do, supported by government, and they ask you to buy in, and they grade you, and they promote you. It's like their own ISO, their own standard something. So if we had done standardization, if we had done grading, if we had done some of this, we can set some of these standards in. You go to a hotel, it's 5-star in price, and it doesn't have hot water running. So these are things that the Supreme Court judgment in Nigeria in 2012 says the federal government has no power to regulate tourism. And that took us back to before independence, because now there is no law regulating tourism in Nigeria. Nobody has the power, except states. So if you have what you call 5-star, it's only for that state. So if you want to go to another one, you need all the states. And you now need a big group who have the power to set standards across the country. Unfortunately, we have not been gifted enough in this country to have something at that level. But my friend who, Otumba, says something that tourism and culture is the only, Otumba Ronshiwe, is the only business that you don't need education to do. Because the man who has a PhD can do at a particular level. But the guy who plays the guitar, who plays the xylophone, doesn't need any education. And he can earn good money.
Well, it's another form of education. It's just that it's not formal education.
Education, okay.
Yes, this one.
We will have to let you go now. Many thanks for being on the show.
Before you go, where are you doing your Easter?
I'll probably be
You
at
can't
work.
be giving an invitation on open television. You can do that off camera.
I want to make sure there are no that she's not going outside Africa.
I promise not to go outside of Africa.